Bonelab is a game I wanted to talk about for a while. Like many, I was very excited for what Stress Level Zero would release after the immense success of Boneworks, and played the game the day of release. To my and many others' surprise, however, the game was not a successor to Boneworks. In this video, I want to elaborate on my thoughts about the game and why Bonelab feels disappointing. Just a heads up, if you haven't played Boneworks before, this video won't contain any real spoilers for the game, but I do recommend you play it. It's a pretty good game. I really like it. I'd rate it a solid 9 out of 10. -1 points because the monkey plushie really freaks me out. You'll know what I mean when you play it. Boneworks is a classic VR game. Many people point to Half-Life Alyx as the first real quote-unquote VR game they've played, and while I'm not discounting its significance or its quality, Boneworks was the first game I played in VR that really excited me for what VR as a medium could be. Boneworks, much like Half-Life Alyx, was essentially an experiment into virtual reality video games, trying to prove that a full-length campaign is both possible and fun in the medium. To explain what makes Boneworks work, we first have to look at what VR means for video games. Virtual reality is, for the purposes of a video game, an interactive 3D controller. It is a headset creating the illusion of being inside the game, and two controllers to create interactivity. This creates a novel way to interact with the game environment. In the same way that a mouse and keyboard inherently dictate how players move and experience the game, controllers and headsets dictate how this illusion of a virtual world is experienced. Boneworks, then, is one of the first games to adapt to this new method of interactivity. Boneworks litters its areas with props and destructible objects which serve two purposes, as set dressing and as interactive physics objects. Anything you think you can do with a beer bottle lying on the ground, you can do in Boneworks. Furthermore, the game gives you ample opportunity to utilize the interactivity and physics of the game to your advantage. Streets is one of the first levels you enter in the game, and it's a good introduction to the way you can approach playing. A normal run of this game, assuming the player doesn't utilize the physics objects at all, will have you going through the corridor, fighting your first nobody, getting the orange key from the raffle area, the blue key from inside the office, and finally exiting the level through the warehouse. However, you can skip all of this if you want to. If you simply use one of the barrels here and hop over this barricade here, you can skip the entire level. Now obviously, most players don't want to skip the entire experience. However, the point of showing this is that Boneworks designs its levels to allow the player free-form ways of play. If you want to stack a few barrels and skip the puzzle entirely, you can. If you get to a trash recycler and don't feel like moving the orange platform, you don't have to. You can simply climb across and maneuver your way into the vent. Furthermore, exploration and inventiveness is rewarded. The game hides little sandbox orbs and secret weapons, things that the player may want to find, in areas you can only get to if you go off the directed course of play. And this is what I mean when I say that Boneworks adapts to the new medium. Stress Level Zero took one of the main advantages of VR, its interactivity, and built an entire campaign around that concept. Some parts, such as Fantasyland, are more linear, but even then, the game still has small opportunities of creativity. Do you want to fist fight the king head on, or do you want to cheese the entire fight by throwing vases at him and hiding on top of the throne? Again, the game gives you opportunities for different interactions. I loved Boneworks when I first played it, and it breathed hope into a new medium that at the time was still getting its bearings. When Stress Level Zero announced that a sequel was coming, I was eager to play it. Bonelab is interesting. The name obviously implies it to be a sequel to Boneworks, but it isn't. The game part of Bonelab is 5 short levels where you escape execution and shoot your way out of oppression into the hands of Jimmy and Lava Gang, and that is where the Bonelab campaign effectively ends. I completed the actual campaign levels in a little over an hour and a half. For comparison, that same amount of time is enough to complete nearly a third of Bonelab's campaign if you're going fast through each level and using shortcuts. The next 6 levels of Bonelab are all short minigame levels that take maybe 20 minutes, including, by the way, Moonbase, which is only a minigame if you count walking through an empty map in low gravity a game of some kind. A level that is just ball puzzles and an arena map against mostly unarmed enemies that takes 5 minutes to complete. And you know what? I had some fun. The 5 real campaign maps are good. They're far less interactive than Boneworks' maps, and there's almost nothing to explore, but it's still fun. Though more compact, the pace is much faster to accommodate a focus on surprisingly engaging combat. The levels worked well to facilitate the gunplay, and I enjoyed them. Even Mine Dive, which gets some complaints for the fact that there isn't any enemies, was still enjoyable. The cart ride was a nice break from the combat, and the theme park aesthetic is just pleasant to be in. The real issue here is that this is 5 levels. 5 out of 13 are actual maps, and the rest are minigames. If Bonelab were 13 honest levels, a more linear, combat-oriented sequel that expanded the lore of the setting, I wouldn't have much to criticize. Sure, it would be a strange pivot, but an engaging one that I would still recommend. Instead, however, Bonelab pivoted to being a sandbox VR game, with the lackluster campaign excused as just the foundation that mods would cover over later. My first issue is a conceptual one. VR sandbox is fun for an hour. Longer than that, and wearing a headset is grating and uncomfortable. I still use a Quest 1, and I'm told it's less of a problem in newer headsets, but VR broadly still has the major limitation that wearing a large weight on your head gets irritating after a few hours. Boneworks spaced its levels out in hour increments, meaning that your average person could finish a few levels before turning off their headset for the day. However, Bonelab wants to be a sandbox game, and a sandbox game that you can only play for an hour or so a day is not a very good sandbox game. My second issue is Bonelab simply doesn't have the systems to be a good sandbox. The first thing I tried to do when playing was make a car. This is actually rather simple in Gary's mod, since you can just get any object, weld a chair and 4 wheels, and have something drivable. Sure, it can't steer, but it's usable to move. You cannot make a car in Bonelab. There's a tool to add wires and ropes, balls and sockets, and elastic binds, but there is nowhere to attach a wheel or make a seat. This is a microcosm of the issue with Bonelab's sandbox on a systems level. There isn't enough to work with to do anything more than fight NPCs, and we already have Arena for that. Now you could argue that maybe the fun comes from player-created levels. That could be true, however there is a significant barrier to that: the Bonelab SDK. Now, if you boot up the Bonelab SDK today, you'll find a decent enough SDK to make something with. However, this is only the case because it took Stress Level 0 2 years after release to publish the full SDK. Despite this, there are some really great mods. Fusion is a real, honest-to-God multiplayer mod that adds good quality multiplayer to your game. That, when without an SDK, is amazing, and shows the incredible passion that many people had for this game despite its flaws. There are quite a few fun levels, both campaign style and sandbox, made by the community. Of course, the main issue here is that since developers wanted to wait so long to publish full SDK, player numbers have dropped significantly, leaving little modding community left to continue making great works like these. So why does this game exist? This game exists because the VR market is not very popular, and it certainly wasn't 4 years ago. The VR market has been in a slump for a long while, and I have no doubt that Stress Level 0 has spent or is close to spending most of the profit that Boneworks generated. Simply put, this game exists as a cash grab. Stress Level 0 had earned a pretty solid reputation for making Boneworks, and it was clear that any sequel they put out would be an instant success. Meta, or Stress Level 0 themselves, one reached out to the other and concluded that one of the best ways of getting money would be to release something attached to the Boneworks brand for the Quest 2. I don't mean to demean Stress Level 0 when I say that. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I think the main issue here is that even if they didn't outright say it, this was pretty clearly anticipated as a sequel and was thought to continue the design decisions of the original game, which it did not. Alright, well that's the thing, that's the end, that's the entire video essay. Let me know if you agree, let me know if you disagree.